How far are you willing to go to be with Jesus? Let that sink in a minute. How far are you willing to go to be with Jesus? I think first it's important to orient ourselves because we're only 2 weeks away from the end of the liturgical year, and then Advent will begin. The readings as we approach the end of the year are building to a crescendo. They deal with the end of our earthly life, life after death, and the resurrection of the body. The first two may give us pause, but the last should give us resolve and hope. We must strive daily for the hope of living with Jesus in eternity. Our first reading from Maccabees deals with the 7 brothers, not willing to sin and even face death for their beliefs. They trusted in God that even though their current life may end, that God would raise them up. It's a sobering thought, but the idea of martyrdom is not some 3,000-year-old idea. Rather, we only need to look back 40 years in local church history at Blessed Stanley Rother's trust in Jesus and his martyrdom. Sometimes martyrdom is not a bodily death, but rather a death to self. Maybe it's to overcome our fear of sharing our love of Jesus Christ with others around us. Or maybe it's getting over the idea that we don't have enough time to pray. The gospel reminds us there's no comparison between life here and the life to come. Jesus says they will see God face to face. What a glorious thought! Our belief in the resurrection should change everything in the way we live our daily lives. But we will face trials. We will suffer. Some of us will even suffer for our faith. I truly pray that these trials and suffering do not destroy our faith. God has a plan for you, for each one of us, and wants us to be with him forever. And yet, why does it seem that everything around us opposes our pursuit of happiness and a deep relationship with Jesus? The truth is, we live in a post-Christian world, a post-Christian time. There are many similarities to the time of Jesus. For instance, the Sadducees, who lived at the time of Jesus, did not believe in life after death. There's an old theologian's joke. It's kind of like a dad joke. The reason they were sad, you see, is because they didn't believe in life after death. Jesus replies to them, "The dead shall indeed rise." Who else do we need to hear it from to believe it? If you believe in Jesus and the resurrection, then everything else has the possibility of redemption. It doesn't mean it will be, but it does mean it's possible. This past week, my class of 22 deacons celebrated our 5th anniversary of our ordination. One personal charism that I've adopted in my diaconate ministry is just to be practical. I've been approached more times than I can account in the last few months in my job, as I travel the country for work, in my secular world, with questions like, what does a personal relationship with Jesus even look like? How do you pray to Jesus and it's not a one-way conversation? And though not martyrdom, I'm kind of like Zacchaeus from last week's gospel reading, a shy, short accountant that's looking for a relationship with Jesus. But in my shy accounting ways, I'm not an extrovert. So it's not martyrdom, But to have conversations with people that I kind of don't know about these topics is a little death to self. But it's clear, people are desperate. They're hungry for answers. And because someday I want to meet all of you in heaven, let's answer a few of them. One huge caveat before I begin: if you have a great prayer life, don't change. If you're struggling, like I was just a few short years ago, when someone would say, "Pray more," and I had no idea what that looked like, here's a few ideas. First, start a routine. For example, when do you pray? In the morning, before everyone else gets up, or in the evening, when you get everyone to bed? Second, where to pray. Set aside a place where you won't be distracted. So, for me, I don't go to my home office because I may be compelled, I need to check emails. Find a place where you've got items that remind you of Jesus. 3, be consistent. At first, it's hard. Our souls move at a much slower pace than the secular world. And the devil wants us to forget that and lies to us that the only way to get ahead is to try to keep up with the rat race of the world. The devil's goal is to distract us from the prize of heaven. So initially, I began with a little timer, 3 minutes. Now it's more than 10 minutes, and it's without a timer. Fourth, prepare yourself. I start with deep breathing. I breathe in the love of Christ, and I breathe out all those negative things that have been running through my head the last 24 hours. Then I breathe in deeply the mercy of Christ, and I breathe out forgiveness on all those who might have offended me. Finally, I breathe in deeply the compassion of Christ and breathe out those things about myself that I don't find lovable. I find that deep breathing slows my racing mind and allows me to be more present with Jesus, with fewer distractions. And if I find myself in that time of prayer distracted again, I just go through those breathing exercises, breathing in Jesus' love, mercy, and compassion. The saints of the church approve the idea of using our imagination in prayer. For example, St. Ignatius of Loyola suggested we use our imagination to put ourselves into the gospel narrative, including imagining the smells, the textures, and the surroundings. The fifth element is the setting and greeting. So may I suggest you use your imagination. Imagine you're somewhere comfortable with Jesus, having a conversation every day. In my mind, I imagine walking up to Jesus and embracing him. I imagine Jesus and I sitting at a pond on a park bench together. Sixth, the conversation. Share with Jesus what's been going on in your life in the last 24 hours, as if you would with your closest friend, revealing to him all that's running around in the four walls of your brain that you might not share with anybody else. Then ask him, what does he desire for you? The church fathers are consistent in the way that we hear the voice of God is through the scriptures that he gave us. So maybe you read the scriptures the night before when you go to bed rather than playing on your phone. Then when you wake up the next morning, recall from those readings just one thing that touched your heart and sit with Jesus over that idea and how he sees his plan for you today. The closing. Then don't just rush away if the timer goes off, but rather Depart as you would with someone that you love the absolute most. Say your goodbyes. Wish each other well. Look forward to visiting again tomorrow. You may wonder, okay, deacon, how do you find the time to do this? Well, there's an anecdotal story about Saint Mother Teresa. I can imagine in my mind her little sisters running up to her saying, "Mother, Mother, we don't have time to pray." And in my mind, I can imagine Mother Teresa saying, "We should pray twice as long," which they would, and then they would get all of their work done, even though they prayed twice as long. Similarly, what I have experienced in my own life is the worst secular days are okay when I spend time with Jesus that morning. And the average secular days without my time with Jesus are some of the worst. So I'll ask you again, how far are you willing to go to be with Jesus? These readings are our wake-up call. We do not have an unlimited amount of time on this earthly pilgrimage. The time to act is now. Will you share your faith with others? Will you commit to a deeper relationship with Christ? Please know, there is new life awaiting us all. May we all live faithfully.